I was standing in my kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the morning sun crawl across my driveway when I heard the unmistakable crack of glass shattering. Not the kind of crack you hear when a kid hits a baseball through a window. This was sharper, heavier, followed by a shriek loud enough to rattle the rest of my house. I dropped the mug. It exploded on the tile. Racing to the front door, I flung it open and was met with a scene so absurd it took me a second to process. There she was, Marlene Fenshaw, HOA president, 60 going on dictator. Her permed helmet of blonde curls bouncing with rage as she stood in my flower bed, still clutching the brick she'd just hurled through my front window. Her mouth was twisted in a snarl. Her lips were pulled so tight they looked stapled to her teeth. "You're 2 weeks late on your HOA dues, Leonard," she screamed, pointing at me with a trembling, liver-spotted finger. "We warned you." I looked past her at the shattered glass littering my foyer, then back at her hand. The brick she carried had a neon green sticky note slapped on it. I stepped closer, snatched the brick from her, and peeled off the note. It read, "Past due. Action taken." You ever had a moment where your brain just stalls? That was me. Just standing there, holding a brick like it was a newborn, trying to understand how the hell this woman thought any of this was okay. "Marlene," I said, slow and calm, "did you just throw a brick through my window over a late fee?" "Consequences, Leonard," she snapped. "The board voted on escalating measures. You've ignored 3 warnings. Don't act surprised." I didn't ignore anything. I barked. "I've been in the hospital the past 2 weeks. My son Patrick was in a car wreck." Marlene blinked, then did that tight-lipped thing people do when they pretend to care. "Then maybe you should have nominated someone to handle your affairs while you were away. Being a homeowner comes with responsibilities." I don't know what stunned me more, the fact that she just admitted to committing a literal crime, or the way she said it like she was reading from a manual. "You broke my window." She didn't even flinch. "And you broke your contract with the HOA. We're even." I should have called the cops right then. But I didn't. Not yet. I stood there fuming while she strutted off like she'd just planted a flag on my porch. That night, I called my buddy Javier. He works construction with a side gig in window installation. He swung by, took measurements, and gave me a quote. It wasn't cheap. Triple pane glass. Custom frame. Labor. I told him to go ahead with the highest-end setup he had. "Triple labor charge too," I added. "You sure?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Dead sure. I wasn't just going to replace the window. I was going to bill Marlene personally and make it hurt." The next morning, I drafted the invoice. It was clean, professional, itemized. I didn't inflate anything. I just picked the priciest, legally justifiable options. Total came out to just over $7,000. I printed 2 copies. One I mailed to Marlene. The other I pinned to the HOA bulletin board right outside the clubhouse. Big, bold letters at the top. Invoice. Property damage caused by HOA president. By noon, my phone blew up. First call was from Marlene. "You think this is funny?" she spat. "Nope. I think it's justice. I'm not paying that." "You will. Or I'll file a property damage claim in small claims court. With security footage. Oh, and did I mention I already reported the incident to the police?" Silence. Then she hung up. "Yeah. I had cameras. I'm not an idiot. I installed them 2 years ago after someone egged my truck for daring to park too close to the curb. HOA never found the culprit, but I had a feeling it wasn't a kid. This time, I had Marlene in full HD, brick in hand. Arm cocked back. Her crazy eyes locked on the glass. It was beautiful. The officer I gave the footage to didn't laugh, but his mouth twitched like he wanted to. "She actually admitted to doing this?" he asked me. "Yup. Said the board voted on it." "That's not how HOAs work. That's vandalism." "Glad you agree." He took the footage, filed the report, and promised follow-up. I wasn't holding my breath, but I wasn't done either. I printed stills from the footage. 3 frames, her winding up, mid-throw, and the glass exploding. I taped them to my window with a big sign underneath, "HOA president attacked this home." The neighborhood noticed. By the weekend, I had people knocking on my door just to say they were tired of Marlene's crap. Stories started pouring in. She fined me $300 for having yellow tulips instead of red. She gave me a notice because my kid's bike was on the porch for 1 afternoon. She called animal control on my Labrador for barking during a thunderstorm. Turns out, Marlene had been operating like a petty tyrant for years, but no one ever pushed back. No one ever had proof. Until now. That Sunday, during the monthly HOA meeting, I showed up early. Sat front row. Brought a projector. When Marlene walked in and saw me setting up, she froze. "This isn't your time slot, Leonard," she said coldly. "I think the neighborhood deserves to see what their dues are funding. You're not on the agenda. I submitted a request 48 hours ago. Check your inbox." She stared at me, jaw tight, then stomped to the back of the room. When it was my turn, I hit play. The video rolled. Gasps filled the room. A few people even clapped. Then I brought out the invoice. This is what she owes me for the window she destroyed. $7,075. I'm giving her 10 days to pay, or I'm filing in court. Marlene tried to speak. I cut her off. And I'd advised the board to consider her removal. Not just for this, but for the years of abuse she's dished out. The room erupted. And just like that, the tide turned. The queen had cracked a window and shattered her own throne. The Monday after the meeting, I stepped outside just before sunrise to collect the mail, half expecting to find a dead squirrel nailed to my garage door. Instead, there was a neat stack of envelopes stuffed in my box, most of them HOA related. One in particular caught my eye. It had no return address and was sealed in an expensive-looking envelope, the kind used for wedding invitations or lawsuits. I opened it right there on the lawn. Inside was a letter printed on heavy cream stationery, signed in blue ink by a name I didn't recognize, Gregory Vance, ESQ. Apparently, this was Marlene's lawyer, and he wanted to cordially inform me of their intention to pursue counteraction against slander, harassment, and defamation of character. I didn't laugh. I didn't even scoff. I just stared at the words, stunned at how far she was willing to go. She hadn't just doubled down, she'd built a whole second floor on her self-delusion. I took the letter inside, scanned it into my computer, and forwarded a copy to my own attorney, Eva Baines. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was a pit bull in a blazer. We'd met through a veterans legal assistance program years ago, when I helped a buddy contest an illegal eviction notice. She owed me one, and I just called in the favor. Eva called me within an hour. "So she's going with slander?" she said. "That's bold, considering you have video of her committing a Class B felony." "She brought a lawyer into this," I said. "It's not just HOA now. She's escalating." "Good," she said. "Let her. The more she kicks, the deeper she sinks. I'll draft a formal response and we'll file a restraining order while we're at it. You're technically a victim of property violence. Is that a real term? It is in court filings when I use it." By Wednesday, the restraining order was processed. Marlene was legally barred from coming within 100 feet of my property. That meant she couldn't even attend HOA meetings if I was present. News of it spread fast. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't have to. Someone on the board leaked it. I suspect it was Elaine, the treasurer. She'd clapped the loudest during the meeting video. Thursday brought the next twist. I was working on my back deck, replacing warped boards, when a city inspector showed up at my gate. Tall guy, thick accent, clipboard in hand. "You Leonard Moss?" he asked. "Depends. You selling something?" He cracked a grin. "No, sir. Got a report here about unauthorized construction and permit violations. Anonymous complaint." I wiped my hands on a rag inside. "Let me guess." Said I was building a shed without a permit. Actually, a gazebo with electrical wiring. And a koi pond. "Wow. She's getting creative." He blinked. "So you know who filed this?" "I have a pretty good idea." He stepped through the gate and looked around. "I don't see anything resembling a pond. Because there is no pond. Or gazebo. I'm replacing decking boards." "That's it." He nodded. "Mind if I take a few pictures for the report? Be my guest." He snapped a few shots, scribbled something, and handed me a copy of the dismissal report. "You're good. Just keep the lumber off the grass. Someone's clearly trying to mess with you. I appreciate it." As he left, he paused at the gate. "I've been through this neighborhood before. Your HOA president's got a reputation. You're not the first she's tried to bury in paperwork. She might be the first to get buried back." That afternoon, I installed a new sign on my lawn. "This property is monitored by legal counsel, security cameras, and a very patient homeowner. By the weekend, people were stopping me during walks to shake my hand. "You're doing what we all wanted to do," said Mr. Langford, a retired firefighter who lived 2 houses down. She fined me last year for hanging an American flag on my porch. Said it was too political. "You willing to go on record about that?" I asked. He nodded. "Damn right I am." I started compiling these stories. Not just gossip, I wanted documentation. Letters, fines, photos. I created a shared drive and invited neighbors to upload anything they had. Within days, the folder was overflowing. Eva reviewed the contents and called me Sunday night. "This isn't just a nuisance pattern," she said. "This is abuse of power. Multiple homeowners, consistent targeting, and violations of property rights. You've got enough here to file a civil suit and possibly force a board review under state HOA code. What's the next step? We give her a chance to resign. If she refuses, we go public." I didn't expect her to resign. And she didn't. Instead, on Monday morning, she filed a restraining order against me. The grounds? Menacing behavior and public endangerment. The judge reviewed both our filings and tossed hers out in 5 minutes. "She vandalized his home," the judge said flatly. He responded with legal action. "That's not menace. That's due process." After that, the dam broke. Elaine, the treasurer, called an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, but word got back to me through my neighbor's teenage kid who helped set up the projector during meetings. According to him, Elaine brought up Marlene's behavior, the restraining order, the police report, and the community backlash. She proposed a vote of no confidence. Marlene lost 4-1. She tried to argue, but the bylaws were airtight. A majority vote from the board could remove any officer for conduct unbecoming and/or damaging to community interests. They stripped her of her presidency, revoked her access to HOA funds, and placed her under formal review. She no longer had the authority to issue fines, file complaints on behalf of the board, or contact residents in any official capacity. The next day, I got another letter. This one wasn't from a lawyer. It was from Marlene herself. Handwritten. 3 pages long. It wasn't an apology, it was a rambling mess of excuses, blame shifting, and veiled threats. She claimed I'd humiliated her, incited a rebellion, and undermined the core values of the neighborhood. I read it once, then fed it into my shredder. The new interim board president, Elaine, stopped by later that week. "I wanted to thank you," she said, handing me a folder. "We've been reviewing the last 2 years of financials. There are discrepancies." "How bad?" "Over $20,000 in questionable expenses. Landscaping that was never done. Repairs no one requested. Catering invoices for events that didn't happen." "You think she skimmed it?" "We can't prove that yet. But we're contacting an auditor." She looked exhausted but relieved, like someone who'd been holding her breath for years and finally exhaled. "I've lived here 12 years, she said. "I've seen good neighbors move out because of her. You didn't just stand up for yourself, Leonard. You gave everyone else permission to stop being afraid." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. That night, I pulled the curtains back and looked out at the street. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the neighborhood belonged to the people who lived in it again, not to the woman who thought she owned it. And somewhere in the distance, I heard the faint sound of a lawnmower, running at 7 in the evening. No fine. No warning. Just a neighbor mowing his lawn whenever the hell he felt like it. A week after Marlene's removal, things settled into an odd calm, the kind that made you suspicious instead of relieved. I didn't trust it. I'd been around long enough to know that people like her don't slink away quietly, they regroup. And sure enough, quietly is not how Marlene operated. It was Friday morning when the next round hit. I was in my garage fixing the wheels on my lawn cart when I heard 2 sharp bangs on my front door. Not knocks. Bangs. I grabbed a rag and opened it to find a county sheriff flanked by 2 serious-looking men in gray suits. "Leonard Moss?" the sheriff asked. I nodded. "What's going on?" One of the suits stepped forward and held up a badge. "Detective Bertram, County Financial Crimes Division. We're following up on a report of embezzlement tied to your neighborhood's HOA." There was a pause. The kind of pause where your brain rewinds everything it knows and then fast-forwards through every possibility. I stepped aside. "Come in." They didn't sit. They didn't look around. Bertram opened a folder and pulled out a document. "You submitted a folder to your HOA's interim president detailing suspicious financial activity. That folder made its way to our office yesterday, and we've already identified multiple instances of forged invoices and duplicate payments to non-existent vendors. What do you need from me? I asked. We need you to verify the origin of the complaints. Was this your idea? I compiled the evidence, I said. But it came from multiple homeowners. I just organized it. Bertram nodded. We appreciate that. Do you know the name Tideview Property Management? No. Never heard of it. It's listed as the contractor for over 70% of the HOA's external maintenance charges last year. We ran the business through state records. It was registered 6 years ago, dissolved 4 years ago, and the address leads to a condemned building 2 towns over. I let out a slow breath. Marlene, that's what we're trying to determine. But the checks were issued under her authorization. We've subpoenaed the HOA's bank statements and are tracking where the funds landed. If it turns out she was funneling dues into a shell company, she's looking at felony fraud and mail fraud charges. The detective looked up at me. This isn't just petty corruption. This is prison time. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. That same afternoon, I got a call from Elaine. She's gone, she said, her voice tight. Packed up in the middle of the night. House is empty. No forwarding address. Her phone's disconnected. I leaned against the wall, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. She knew the heat was coming. I think she knew before we did. The board immediately froze all outgoing HOA expenditures and hired a forensic accountant. What they found made the original discovery look like a dropped penny. Over $40,000 had been siphoned through phony vendors in the past 2 years. Landscaping, pest control, even a bogus community wellness consultant who was supposedly paid monthly for mystery services. Every check was signed by Marlene. Half of them were deposited into accounts opened in her maiden name. By Monday, a warrant was issued for her arrest. The news broke by Wednesday. Not just in our town, local news stations picked it up. They aired footage from the HOA meetings, including the now infamous video of her throwing the brick through my window. They even ran a clip of my neighbor Langford recounting her bizarre flag fine, though they bleeped most of his commentary. Reporters started showing up. Cars with satellite dishes parked on the street like we were a crime scene. Neighbors peeked through blinds and huddled in driveways, trying to piece together the story like it was a soap opera. I stayed inside mostly. I wasn't looking for fame. I just wanted accountability. But the story didn't stop with Marlene. The accountant discovered that 2 other board members had signed off on the fake expenses, Donnie Creel and Vanessa Pritchard. Both claimed they thought the vendors were legitimate. Donnie said he only signed what Marlene put in front of him. Vanessa claimed she never even read the invoices. Neither excuse held up. Donnie was forced to resign. Vanessa tried to hang on, but the community voted her out during a special election. New blood filled the board within the month, people who actually lived in the neighborhood instead of trying to rule it. Me? I didn't run for anything. I had no interest in politics. But I did agree to help draft the new bylaws. The biggest change? Transparency. Every expenditure over $100 now had to be posted publicly on a digital ledger. No closed-door votes. No secret fines. And no more unilateral decisions. Everything had to go through a full board vote with public comment allowed before approval. That's when I finally started to feel peace return. But there was still one last mess to clean up. Marlene's house sat dark and empty for weeks. The grass grew wild. Flyers piled up on the porch. It looked haunted. Kids started daring each other to run up and touch the door. Eventually, the bank foreclosed. Turns out she hadn't paid her mortgage in 3 months. Elaine called me again. We're debating what to do with the property, she said. The bank's auctioning it off next month. Some folks want to turn it into a community center. Let the new owner decide, I said. But if they ask, suggest a dog park. Marlene hated barking. She laughed. So did I. Until now. The final twist came in the form of a beige envelope that arrived on a warm Thursday afternoon. No return address. Postmarked from a small town in Mississippi. Inside was a handwritten note. You think you won. But the HOA was never the problem. People like you are. No signature. No threat. Just venom. I turned it over to the police. They ran the print, partial, smudged, inconclusive. I didn't care. Let her send postcards from whatever hole she'd crawled into. The damage was done. Her empire had crumbled. And the neighborhood was finally free. The window she shattered had been replaced with reinforced glass. Triple pane. Soundproof. Javier had done a good job. Too good, honestly. I could barely hear the birds anymore. But I kept it. Not as a trophy. As a reminder that sometimes the brick someone throws at you is the best thing that ever happens. Because it gives you a reason to finally tear down the rot, polish up what matters, and rebuild something stronger. And this time, you make damn sure it's HOA proof. 2 months after Marlene disappeared, her house still sat lifeless at the end of the cul-de-sac, its porch sagging like it had given up. The grass had turned brittle, and the shrubs were clawing toward the sidewalk. It was the neighborhood's one remaining scar, and no one wanted to touch it. Then one morning, a black Suburban rolled up just after sunrise. I watched it from my kitchen window, coffee in hand. A man stepped out in a gray sports coat, carrying a briefcase and a small duffel bag. He didn't look like a real estate agent or a banker. He looked like someone trained not to be noticed until he wanted to be. He knocked on my door like he already knew I was home. "You Leonard Moss?" he asked, flashing a badge so fast I barely caught the name. "Agent Tobias Rourke, Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Inspector General." I stepped aside and held the door open. He didn't sit, didn't even glance around, just opened his briefcase on my dining table and laid out a neatly folded stack of documents. "We're conducting a federal investigation into a fraudulent HOA fund scheme connected to multiple shell corporations. Your neighborhood's former president, Marlene Fenshaw, is at the center of it." I crossed my arms. Didn't know HUD handled stuff like this. He looked up, eyes sharp. "When fraud involves federally backed mortgages, misappropriated community funds, and falsified maintenance contracts tied to public infrastructure grants, it becomes our business." I nodded slowly. So she wasn't just scamming us. She was stealing from the government. He pulled out a manila folder and opened it. Inside were photos of Marlene's surveillance shots. One showed her exiting a hotel in Biloxi. Another had her at a gas station wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap with her hair dyed jet black. We've been tracking her across 3 states. She opened at least 6 shell companies under aliases. Tideview Property Management was just the start. She also registered fake pest control services, pool maintenance, even a bogus consultancy agency focused on neighborhood resilience. I leaned forward. And those invoices she used? All fake. She forged signatures from former board members, including one who passed away 2 years ago. I felt my stomach twist. "How deep does this go?" She laundered over $90,000 through these shells. "We've connected her to 2 other HOAs in the state with similar activity. Yours was the only one that pushed back early enough to prevent her from draining the reserve fund completely." I rubbed the back of my neck. "So what do you need from me?" He handed me a subpoena. "Testimony. You're the only one with clear audio-visual evidence of her engaging in property destruction and admitting board authorization for escalated measures. That video opened the door for our investigation." "Happy to help," I said. "She nearly turned this place into a prison yard." He packed up the folders, then paused. "You should know we've issued an arrest warrant. She's officially a fugitive. If she contacts you, report it immediately. She's not just a scam artist. She has a history of retaliation." As he left, I stood on the porch and watched the Suburban pull away. The sky was beginning to cloud over, and the wind carried a bite that hadn't been there the day before. Later that week, I was called in to testify before a federal grand jury. The courthouse was 3 counties over, a brutal drive through backroads and construction zones. But when I walked into that wood-paneled room and saw the seal above the bench, it felt worth it. They asked about the footage, about the HOA meetings, about the financial documents I'd organized. I kept it factual. No jokes, no anger, just the truth. She'd crossed a line, and I wasn't the only one she'd tried to run over. Afterward, the assistant U.S. attorney pulled me aside. "She's facing a combination of federal wire fraud, mail fraud, and financial crimes. If convicted, she could be looking at 20 years. I nodded. "I'll sleep fine with that." The next major shift came from the state legislature. Apparently, our story had made enough noise that a representative introduced a bill requiring third-party audits for any HOA managing over 50 homes. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. Back in the neighborhood, Elaine and the new board moved fast. They'd hired a full-time property manager from an accredited firm, posted monthly financials online, and held open Q&A sessions at the community center. The difference was night and day. People started showing up to meetings again, not to scream, but to ask questions, to suggest things, to help. Then the bank finally auctioned Marlene's house. A young couple bought it, a nurse and a mechanic. Real people. First-time homeowners who spent their first weekend pressure washing the driveway and repainting the mailbox. The house had life again. Elaine stopped by the day after they moved in. "We're naming the new community garden after your son," she said. "Patrick's Grove. Heard he's walking again. He took his first steps last week," I said. "Doctor says he'll be jogging by spring." She handed me a flyer. "We're holding a vote next month on limiting board terms and requiring rotating leadership every 2 years. No more lifers." "Good call." She hesitated. "You ever think about running?" "Not a chance." She laughed. "Didn't think so. But you've earned your seat at the table, whether you want it or not." The next day, I visited the newly planted garden. It sat in the center of the cul-de-sac where an old basketball court had cracked beyond repair. Now it held rows of raised beds filled with starter vegetables, herbs, and wildflowers. A small wooden sign read, "Patrick's Grove, where things grow right." I stood there a long time, letting the wind carry the scent of fresh soil and sage. A few kids biked past, one of them shouting something about the tomatoes already sprouting. No one was being fined. No one was afraid. Later that evening, I got a call from Agent Rourke. "We got her," he said. She was caught trying to flee through Port Everglades under a fake identity. She had $27,000 in cash sewn into a travel pillow. "Where's she now?" "In custody. No bail." I thanked him and hung up. No celebration. No victory lap. Just quiet satisfaction. That night, I sat on the couch with the window open, listening to the wind move through the neighborhood. Somewhere a dog barked. Kids laughed. A lawnmower started up late. And no one complained. Not because the rules were gone, but because the fear was. Because the brick she threw at my window didn't just crack the glass. It cracked the illusion that we had to take it. That silence was the price of peace. It wasn't. And now, finally, we had both.